there are these phases that people in this industry go through. And in any business that's, I would call it a service-based business, meaning you are providing a service to the world, even if that service is to a certain degree in the form of product. And that in order to get from here, where we are trying to kickstart business, so actually just as a show of hands, how many of you are in the kickstart business phase? Okay. And then how many of you are in the, okay, foundation is laid, I want to take this to the next level? Yeah, pretty much what we expected, probably 60-40, right? And what we realized through the experience of interacting with and coaching and supporting and mentoring, and then our own journeys of interacting with these thousands and thousands of people, we just got super clear, like, these phases need to be clearly identified and clearly articulated, and that if you can get really clear on what to do in each part of that phase, one, it, for the most part, stops all the other crap that people are doing that's not working. Much easier to do. And it helps you understand what's most important now and what's not.
There's another piece I hope by now you get from us around integrity, that we really want people to be successful. And that if we are going to support visionary leaders in executing their vision and having a big impact in the world, you need to be successful at what you do. There is no other way. And so as part of this dialogue is like, well, what's really needed at each one of these phases for people to be successful? And to jump from like some place that you are to this other, like, oh my gosh, I'm not having enough clients right now, to I have rooms full of 300 or 1,000 people or something showing up. Like, there are a sequence of steps that need to happen in between. And what is so apparent to us is that they build on one another.
100%.
Right? So if you don't know how to have enrollment dialogues one-on-one, what makes you think you're going to be able to have enrollment dialogues one-on-many? You need to practice that. And they build on one another and support one another. And if people can really truly be where they're at and get the support they need for where they're at, they'll have the highest level of success and ability to move from that place to the next place and the next place and the next place. And before you know it, they're on great stages, they're speaking, they're doing the work they're here to do at a bigger level. And that sense of like, well, I know I'm called to serve at a bigger level, they're actually doing it. They're bridging that gap.
And the final thing I'll say before we pass out this little worksheet for you guys to use is to realize it doesn't have to take a long time either. One of the reason we're framing this way is sometimes we've seen people get deflated when we say, you think you're playing here, but actually you need to be here. And they're like, I don't wanna. I'm a loser. And you have to understand that, for example, in a new project that I am yet to tell you about, I'm back into phase 1. I'm totally in phase 1 again. And it's because I know I need to start there. Now, how long I'll be in phase 1 for, if I look ahead, it'll approximately last about 2.5 months from when I started. And then I'll move fully into phase 2. Right? And so you got to understand, like, I'm not excluded from this. That it's the same thing Jeffrey goes through, I go through, we all go through. And by knowing it, it actually makes it so much easier to progress through the phases in a way that works. So that said, go ahead and hand out the worksheets. And let's help you see this in a hopefully a new way that really shows you your path forward.
We've broken these phases up into 4 basic phases. And, these are sort of like, here's phase 1, here's phase 2, and you're like, well, I don't know if I'm in phase 1 or phase 2, for example. You might actually be in a transition from one phase to another. So some things from phase 1 might be true, and other things from phase 2 might be true. And that's, again, between 2 and 3 and 3 to 4. But for probably everybody in this room, these 4 phases will encompass like everything you'll be up to or could be up to, at least in the next few years. And beyond that, there are other things.
And the only other thing that I will say about that is I wouldn't say that it's rigid, meaning you don't have to have all boxes in phase 1 checked off to be squarely in phase 2. It's more understanding the mechanics and the foundation of what happens in each phase that allow you to move. So it's not like you have to be like, nope, I can't go to phase 2 yet. Box number 3 is not checked off. That's not going to work.
But it is allowing yourself to really orient yourself to what's true about where you're at in business right now. Because if you really are where you're at, that's the quickest path to be able to move to wherever you're going.
So let's talk about them. So first, let's set the whole context of the picture of it, and then we'll go through each individually. So the context is that a lot of people have great ideas, and yet they have no business. So people that have great ideas and no business, it's really more of a hobby. They're not treating their great ideas like a business. And a business becomes a business when there's actual revenue and money being generated. So what a lot of people, especially in this industry, from some of the mega launches that are out there, that are so unbelievably compelling and well done, they make you believe that the way to be successful is then to go and start creating digital products, or to go start building this massive web presence, or to go start doing online launches, or to go start doing affiliate marketing, or to go, right? And there's all these things. We've actually been guilty of this in the past. And if you've noticed, that's why we've pulled a lot of stuff down on the front end from our site. Because we're like, this is not the right way of doing this. Right? And what's required in that first phase is basically to validate that what you're doing is something people will exchange good money for. That phase 1 is about getting individual people to opt in with their money. Now, part of that requires you knowing what it is you're doing and deciding it. Part of it requires you learning the strategies of how to get in relationship with people from the context of you offering something that you want people to buy. And a much bigger part of that is the enrollment dialogue. Is how do you become the kind of person and learn the kind of skills so that when you interact with somebody, you have the dialogue and they're like, I'd love to buy that. How do I do that? Right? And so phase 1, whether you call it about getting clients or getting consultant gigs or selling packages or whatever you want to call it, it's individualized work. And it's individualized work for a decent amount of money. So for example, we have some friends, even somebody just recently that was talking to us, and they're like, yeah, I'm doing really good. I charge $200 an hour for my sessions. And we're like, and? You know? And it was like, you move through phase 1 when you're selling $1,000 plus packages. Because it's easy to sell something for $100 or $200, but the conversation changes radically in terms of commitment and holding a space for them to step forward when you start to create something that people can really dive into your work around and really do. Right?
So let's go through this checklist, and I'll give you an example. So phase 1, you have at least 5 one-on-one clients. You're selling multi-$1,000 packages. What is enroll 1 to 4 at least?
Meaning at least one out of the 4 people.
You enroll at least 1 out of 4 people that you talk to in your enrollment dialogues.
At worst case scenario.
Right. And you're making $5K a month or more. So I'll tell you where this changed for me is actually, you'll meet my good buddy Tim Kelly tomorrow. He'll be speaking on this stage tomorrow. And when I began, he was one of my mentors. And I learned his process and taught it. In fact, we taught it all over the world. But when I started leading that process, I started at, I think it was $1,500 to take someone through this 3-month process. But what helped was I got so clear about who I was on earth to serve, what the problem was that they were experiencing that I was designed to support them through, what outcomes I could promise, and roughly how long it would take to deliver on that promise. So that when I would see people in rooms like this, there were times when I would talk about my work in one sentence, and somebody would have tears come to their eyes, because they were like, oh my God, that's me. Over time, it did not happen right out the gate. But that same process, I sold one-on-one for $1,500. I started at $1,500. I went to $2,500. Then I believe I jumped to $5,000 for that process. Then I jumped to $7,500. Then $10,000. Then $12,500. That's where I capped out on that particular process. Same basic process, same period of time. My skill got better. Who I was calling forth in it got up-leveled, right? And the outcomes I knew I could promise got more and more refined. And what was so great about that is when I understood all those people, all those pieces of like, what can I really truly promise? And who do I know in my bones needs this? So that when I meet them, I'm like, I am designed to work with you. That's compelling when it's true, right? It's compelling when it's true. And so phase one allows you to develop all of that stuff. Like, here's the process, here's who. You know, we talk about tribe, track, and transformation here. Here's the tribe I serve, here's the track I'm in, here's the transformation I can promise, and I can do it consistently such that when I have enrollment dialogues, my enrollment dialogues, if I wanted someone to hire me, if it felt like the right fit, I got up to about a 95% close rate, right? It became just a weird anomaly when someone didn't hire me, when it felt true. You know, it was like, well, that was weird. Huh, all right, you know? But it's just, and it was because it wasn't that I learned the most cool, manipulative skills to get them to say yes, right? It's that I spoke a deeper truth. And that is the setup for phase two, because when you really know your tribe, your track, your transformation, you can speak to their deepest need with truth and rigor, then you can start speaking one to few and start gathering that flock in larger numbers.
So I can already feel some of you going, yeah, this sounds nice, but what I do is not something that can be sold for multiple thousands of dollars. Yeah, this is nice, but in my industry, that's not how it works, or that's not what I was trained in. So this is exactly the point. Right? If you want to stay in the little box that a lot of people decide to stay in, you're right. You're not supposed to be in phase one, you're supposed to be in the box.
Phase zero is a box.
Phase square.
Phase square.
But part of it is learning the way in which you start to develop a body of work, you know, to where you develop something that is uniquely yours. Like, I am extremely well trained, and I've used a lot of that training, but what I've developed has been ours, right? And so that's the energetic behind phase one. It's not just about selling. It's about learning what is your body of work and learning what it is that you can offer. And for many of you, you know, selling a $3,000 package, it like makes you choke. And that's the point. Because I assure you, what most people do is, oh, yeah, I'm not going to go there, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go try to sell it online behind my computer. And it falls totally flat because the energetic of you holding the real space of absolutely this is This is a great thing to do for $3,000. This is a no-brainer. Translates in such a more powerful way into everything else that you're doing. Right, so a lot of this phase one is embodiment in practice. And the results are there. I'll also say this. This is where the quickest, biggest money is made. I mean, I always feel a little arrogant, but it's so true saying this, that it's not difficult to make $10,000 or $15,000 a month. Because in this phase, like Jeffrey just said, like when your practice is the strategies to get into conversations with people, to enroll people, to create packages that really speak to the value you provide, every conversation you have with somebody that you draw in is a potential for a $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 client. Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't take many conversations to make that much money. But I don't want to belittle the process to get there, because there's a lot that you have to sift through and clarify and work out, and I get it. But the important thing is that you really stay in phase one and get so good at operating there. Not only so you have the confidence and the words and the clarity, but the money's there to then start to move into phase two.
Yeah. Let me also say, phase one, I think, is the most difficult phase of business.
I
agree. It is. You know, because that's where, like, you have to take this soup of your ideas and your calling and your emotions and your training and your interests and craft something that delivers value to a specific group of people who are willing to pay for it. And that, like, taking all that stuff from the soup and being able to, like, sort through it and go, like, oh, here's the gem in the midst of it, and that's what I need to base my business off from. That takes some doing. It takes a lot of support. It takes, like, yeah. You need to stretch a lot as a person to find that in yourself and in the world. And it's the first time you really move from you to them. This is my calling and what I want to do and all of my skill, to who in the world needs it that I'm designed to serve and is willing to pay for it. So you move from you to them in phase one. And I think all of that sort of stuff, it's where I think, like, you need the most support on some level, and need most reflection to gain that level of clarity to then move to phase two.
Yeah. So just take a little checkmark inquiry, right? Do you have at least 5 high-paying one-on-one clients? When I say high-paying, I mean, let's just say $1,000 clients, people that have invested at $1,000. Are you selling those multi-$1,000 package? I'd say you can even start with 1,000. You know, it's 1,500 is probably the range. But are you able to enroll 1 in 4? And I would put as a caveat to that, are you having at least, I would say, 20 to 30 conversations a month? Really? I would say that you're involved and engaged in at least that many dialogues every single month to enroll people. And of course, the financial side is a good indication as to the phase you're in. You're making at least $5K a month consistently every single month. Right? And so if you checked all those boxes off, then we can start to move into phase two. Or here's the other thing I was thinking about this morning when I was just percolating on this, is that in this new thing I'm doing, which I'll tell you about tomorrow, I'm so, like, anxious.
It's like a yo-yo. It goes,
I'm so anxious to tell you about it because it's so cool and so big. I can't do it till tomorrow. I can't. Because I have, like, a whole little thing to tell you about it. And it's really cool because it'll be able to, I can't do it, sorry. Sorry. But I'm in phase one because I'm talking with people individually. I'm in phase one because I'm in the individual enrollment dialogue. I'm in phase one because, I'm reaching out to people one-on-one. I'm actually not selling anything at all. And so it's not a sales thing, but I'm in that dialogue.
They're enrollment dialogues.
They're enrollment dialogues. I'm in the enrollment dialogue. I'm not selling anything, but I'm in the enrollment dialogue every single day. And so because of that, I can kind of say, I know how to do this well enough that I don't have to have all these 5 things checked off for me to move to the next phase, right? It's not like if you've done this before, you have to be like, all right, well, that's my point, basically. If you are already very accomplished, and let's say you're starting something new, you still start in phase 1, but you don't have to have each one of these individual things like checked off to the T to move on to the next phase. And the only reason I say that is because as somebody who's starting something completely different that has nothing to do with this business, it's not like I'm starting from scratch and I have no idea what to do. I'm just taking the phase 1 mechanics and moving through the process. Make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Let's go to phase 2. So phase 2, you are starting your online empire, which means you're moving from these one-on-one dialogues, one-on-one coaching, one-on-one service delivery to one-on-few. So you have a clear website with unique positioning. It's not generic in your corner of the world. So for example, if you're a raw food coach and you're just like, yeah, I do raw food coaching and here's all about raw food. Well, there's a bunch of raw food coaches out in the world. There's no unique stamp about who you serve around raw food, about all the problems they're experiencing, about the ways they're trying to solve it that aren't working. You're hearing back to earlier today, right? About how this is a unique way to help solve those problems, right? Raw food is how, but it's not actually the what of their problems, and it's not actually truly the transformation you provide versus the next raw food person down the street.
This would be our way of saying there's no vision. Your website has it's not communicating your vision, right? Really. Yeah, it does hurt a little bit sometimes. But that's, that phase is it's about, okay, how do I start to broadcast who I am to the world in a bigger way? And how do I define the strategy for that, but also just the messaging? And again, that's the point. It comes from you working with people, interacting with them, getting their feedback, learning what's really special about it. That's why you need to be through phase 1 to move into phase 2.
Yeah. So you're consistently doing email marketing and content creation. You have at least 5,000 people on your list. You're consistently making $15,000 a month or more. And you have a solid understanding of the online launch process. So there's a big jump from phase 1 to 2. And can you get that if you don't have phase 1 handled, your ability to clearly communicate your value in any compelling way in phase 2 is nil, right? So that's the necessity of phase 1. Phase 2, there's a lot of other skill there. There's a lot of technology that starts to come into place in phase 2. There's an understanding of like, what is this marketplace I'm playing in? And what's my stamp? Like, what do I stand for that really is like my thing? And this really is where vision starts to come into place. You don't need necessarily the biggest world-changing, compelling vision to enroll one-on-one people. You don't. You need to know their problems and be able to solve them.
And to stand for them.
And to stand for them. But in phase 2, you do need to start moving. And I'll tell you, the people that don't have this in phase 2, that don't have a compelling vision, work really hard for very little results. I see it in our industry all the time. And then they go to like all these other people out there in the world to like find these strategies to fix something that's broken because they didn't actually finish phase 1.
Perfect. So let me actually just take a temperature in the room here. Who feels pretty squarely in phase 1? In phase 1? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then who feels like they're moving into or are in phase 2? Yeah, that's fine. Transitional, you're moving into it. Okay. Now, what I've found, I was in phase 2 for a pretty good chunk of time. I was probably in phase 2, pretty good chunk of time in my language, about a year. It was a long year.
It's Max Simon
yeah,
speak.
Right. It was a year, and I think it was a year, and it was about a $500,000 a year business. So I was making way more than $15,000 a month. But it was at that point that I started to see that I could take what I had developed and learned there and just leverage it. That's the point of phase 3. It's not actually that you work harder, it's that you just learn the strategies to leverage. And a big part of it is strategic. And a big part of it is also you expanding your container. It's about you being willing to let the good in and let the good out. It's about you being willing to invest in deeper levels of support and direction. You know, this is when I really started investing in a full-blown video team. This is when I started really filling in the gaps of this team so that I could do one thing and one thing only and create content. You know, this is when my level of responsibility in my business actually got way more narrow, which is a nice thing for most of you to hear, that a lot of people think the bigger the business gets, and this is a lot of people's experience, the harder they have to work. My experience was the opposite. It was the more focused I got on just doing what I was great at. And in that, we started doing big launches, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, lots of joint venture partners, big events, you know, stuff that there's a lot of build-up and then a big burst of energy. And the only way that that works is when you are just rock solid from phase 2. You know, you've done it enough times in phase 2 and gotten results that as you move into that phase, it's not like a guessing game, it's just staying rooted in the direction and the strategy and not letting yourself get off the hinges, right?
I would also say, as you move from 1 to 2, that's usually when you start to build out your team a bit more. Although oftentimes when people are moving into 2, it's more contractors, right? You have this virtual assistant there and this virtual assistant there and maybe this third one over there. As you move from 2 to 3, part of the reason we're saying you have to be at least at 15K a month is because you have to start building team, and that takes investment, right? And so what you see up here, that takes investment. And really understanding the mechanics of online launches and how to do bigger reach is required to have that kind of consistent income before you even start thinking about, you know, investing the kind of money it takes to put on events like this, right? Which is when you start to move into 3 and 4.
I will say too, my one consideration for that point is that I've always been pretty focused on building core team in the process. And so I agree with the expansion of the team, but I still feel really strongly that everybody, no matter what phase you're in, should start building team.
Absolutely.
Phase 1, start building team. Phase 2, start expanding team. Phase 3 is where you really fill it out, you know.
We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow when I'm going to talk about your genius zones. And you'll start to see very quickly, if you don't have a team yet, where you need to start with your first investment. If you have 1 or 2 people, you'll start to see what you need to fill in the team.
There's such a cool thing that we're going to do tomorrow it's around collaboration. I feel like I'm always saying tomorrow. I will tell you about this cool project tomorrow. So that's just so you know. All right.
Great. So phase 3, going to the next level. You're doing 6-figure launches and events, as Max mentioned. You have at least 5 reliable JV partners. And these are like solid people with list and reach that you work with. These aren't like, oh, I have somebody that mails to their email list for me, and they have like 500 people on their email list. Unless it's an amazing 500 people. Marketing manager on your team, and you're making at least $500,000 or more, right? So that's where you're in phase 3. And a lot of people in our industry seek to get to phase 3. That's sort of their like picture of where they're heading. Man, if I can get to phase 3.
6-figure launch.
Oh, it's amazing.
You guys would crack up if you hear the like emails that people send behind the scenes in this industry. They're just all so silly. It really is. It's so silly.
Yeah. Phase 4. Automate your business. Lean into your next level calling. So again, these aren't like black and white between these phases. There's pieces that you'll be doing between them. And once you are in phase 3 and all those pieces are in place, then you can start moving into automated online marketing, consistent paid traffic, and multiple content channels.